Hey, this is Will, and in this lesson, we will be talking about setting up a Kubernetes API front-end load balancer. So let's just look at the architecture diagram real quick, just to kind of get a reminder of what it is we're trying to do. We're going to be creating this load balancer right here, and it's going to be an Nginx load balancer. And what we're doing is we're going to balance traffic to the Kube API server, which is running on both of our Kubernetes control nodes. That way we can access both of these nodes in a load balanced fashion through this load balancer, rather than just depending on a single node being up and running at any given time. So this is what we're going to be implementing in this lesson, is this Kube API load balancer. Now here's all my cloud servers that I have stood up, and you may remember early on in this course, I said that I was going to use this last server, server number 6, for my load balancer. So this is the server that I'm going to be working with in this lesson. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that public IP, and I'll get logged into that server. So now I'm logged into my 6th cloud server, which I'm going to use for my load balancer. And the first thing I need to do is I need to go ahead and install Nginx, because that's what we're going to be using to actually provide the load balancer functionality. So I'll just do a sudo apt-get-y install Nginx. And now that Nginx is installed, I'm ready to go ahead and start configuring it. So I'm going to do a systemctl enable Nginx, just to make sure that Nginx starts up automatically when the server starts. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a directory. I'll do a sudo mkdir-p, and the directory I'm going to create is going to be etc/nginx tcp-conf.d. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a TCP stream, which is just a feature of Nginx, and we're going to create this folder just as a generic place to store configurations that are related to TCP streams. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to edit the main Nginx config file. I'm just going to do a sudo vi on etc nginx nginx.conf. It's the main config file for the Nginx server. And I'm going to go all the way down to the end of this file. There's a lot of default configuration here. I'm just going to leave all that in place for now and not worry about it. And I'll come down here to the bottom, and I'm going to add a new line, and I'm going to create an include statement. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to include everything that is in that etc nginx tcp-conf.d directory. That way we can put our configuration file in there, and Nginx will pick it up. So I'm going to put a /* just to make sure that we pick up all the files inside that tcp-conf.d directory. Now that I've added that, I'm going to go ahead and save and quit. And what I need to do next is I need to create an actual config file in that directory. In order to do that, I'm going to set up a couple of environment variables. And these are just temporary variables that I'm going to use to help me create my config file. And the first one's going to be called controller0_IP. These are going to be the IP addresses of our 2 Kubernetes control servers. So I'm going to come back here, and I'll just copy the private IP of my first control server. For me, that's server 1. So I'm just going to copy this private IP. And I'll come in here and paste it in. That's going to be the value of that controller0 IP variable. Then, of course, I'm going to create a controller1 IP, and that's going to be the private IP of my second controller. So I'll paste that in. And now I'm ready to go ahead and create my configuration file. So I'm going to create this file, etc/nginx/tcp-conf.d/kubernetes.conf. And what I'm doing is I'm creating a TCP stream, and I'm defining the upstream, which I'm giving a name of Kubernetes. And here's my 2 servers that are in that upstream. These are the 2 servers that we're going to load balance our traffic to. So we're using those 2 environment variables that we just created to put in those IP addresses here. And of course, we're going to point to port 6443 because that's the port where the Kubernetes API server is listening. So we have our controller 0 IP and our controller 1 IP. Then I'm defining my server, and I'm actually listening on 2 ports. I really only need to listen on 6443, but I decided to go ahead and expose 443 as well, simply because that's just the default HTTPS port. And we're not using that port for anything else on this box, so I'll go ahead and listen on 443 as well. And then I'm proxy passing my Kubernetes upstream. So that's my Nginx configuration. And of course, when I create the file, you can see that the actual IPs are substituted for those variables. And what I need to do next is I need to reload the configuration. If I don't reload the configuration, Nginx won't see these new changes that I've made. So I'm going to do a sudo nginx -s reload, and that will instruct Nginx to reload these configurations and pick up the new changes. So now I have successfully set up my load balancer. All that remains is for me to test it and make sure that it's working. So we'll just do a curl -k. I need the -k because, of course, we're using certificates that we generated earlier, and they're not trusted by default. So I'm just going to do a -k to make sure that I don't have any problems with those certificates right now. And I'm going to access https://localhost:6443/version. And what I'm doing here is I'm making a request to the Nginx server that's running on this box. But the Nginx server is configured to forward that request to one of my 2 Kubernetes control nodes. So the response I'm going to get from this version endpoint should actually come from one of those control nodes, and it should contain the JSON response from Kubernetes that provides version information about my Kubernetes cluster. So I'll run that, and sure enough, I got my response. This response is telling me that I have Kubernetes 1.10, and then of course here's the version from Git and all the other information that I normally get from the Kubernetes version endpoint. And that shows that my load balancer is up and running, and it is successfully forwarding these requests to the Kubernetes API.